Justice Quest.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, USA. We're here live at Justice Quest for another episode. Today's scripture reading, my name, by the way, is Tom O'Neill. I'll be your host today for Justice Quest. This is a show where we unabashedly call for the death penalty because God's word is clear. We as Psalm 89 says, justice and righteousness are the foundation of your throne. We have so little of that today on both counts. And but today we're going to go ahead and we've covered politicians, we've covered the Department of Justice, the FBI, presidents to a small degree. But today we're going to go ahead and cover banks, and I don't think enough attention has been paid to that. When was the last time you hear the headline, but you don't hear what happened? Well, today we're going to be covering that. And I'm going to read you today's scripture. It comes out of 1 Timothy 6:10. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness and pierced them through with many sorrows. Yeah, with great wealth comes many sorrows. That's in other areas of scripture. I believe it's in Proverbs. But, you think having no money has got problems. Having money brings problems of its own. And it goes on in verse 17, command those who are rich in this present age not to be haughty, nor to trust in uncertain riches, but in the living God who gives us richly all things to enjoy. Yeah. So anyway, what we have today is something that, might shock you a little bit. I don't know how well you keep on what's going on in the world, but we've all heard of bank caught money laundering, this and that and the other thing, but we never hear the fallout from that. Well, surprisingly, there's very little of it. Okay, and we're going to go through 20 banks and financial institutions caught cheating the system. Yeah. These were banks that were caught. Now, remember my philosophy that when you see one rat, there's 50 of them back there that you don't see. So a dime will get you $1. In other words, I will pay you 10 to 1 that there's other fraud going on too still today. All right. Why? Because we're not hanging the CEOs of these accounts, all right, or these banks. All right. Wells Fargo. Now let's start out there. Wells Fargo is a well-known bank throughout the United States. In fact, they owned my first mortgage and they had my credit card for a while. Well, I was in the military when they had my credit card and I got deployed overseas. And when I got back, I sent in my payment, which was overdue, and they jacked my interest rate up to 29.99% and on the next monthly billing. And I said, why'd you do that? Because you were late for one payment. I was deployed overseas. Well, we didn't know that, but you're still gonna have to pay it. I said, we're done. I said, I'm gonna go ahead and I went down to my local bank and I said, yep, give me one of your credit cards and here's what happened with Wells Fargo. And they said, okay. So anyway, but they also held my mortgage. Now, I had an adjustable rate mortgage, and the rate I was paying was like 10 or 11%. But yet the interest rates at that time were in the late 90s were falling down through 6% again. And I'm looking at this and I'm saying, I just heard on the radio the prime rate was at 6.2%. Why am I paying 11.3? So I called up Wells Fargo and I said, what's going on here? Oh, we're sorry about that, and I explained to him, I said, the prime rate's at 6.2%. I might be having to pay 7.2 at most. and but the rates are falling, but my mortgage keeps going up and up and up. Oh, we're sorry, you slipped through the cracks, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, oh, well, whatever. They got caught several years later in a lot doing such shenanigans. And what happened is several years after that, I received a letter. Did you have a Wells Fargo incident with your home mortgage? And I said, yeah, I did. I never got anything from it, but with a class action lawsuit. Again, the only ones who make money are the lawyers, and we've documented that on this show many times. All right, but anyway, Wells Fargo. This is of 20 banks and financial institutions caught cheating the system. The pressure cooker environment at Wells Fargo led employees to open a staggering 3.5 million authorized accounts. Now, how can you create an account out of thin air without customers having the slightest clue? Branch workers crushed under impossible sales targets, reported to forging signatures and creating dummy email addresses to meet quotas their bosses demanded. This wasn't just a one-off, but a systemic fraud spanning up 15 years. The price tag ultimately reached $3 billion in penalties while shattering the trust in one of America's oldest banks. Yeah. Love of money, Goldman Sachs. I don't know if you people have ever heard of these institutions or these incidents, but it's something we need to go ahead and keep an eye on, because Second Timothy, and we'll get into that more. In fact, I might devote the entire show to Second Timothy on Friday. But the love of money is one of the reasons that the end is going to be near, and this isn't just in the United States. This is worldwide, and we'll get to that in a minute. Goldman Sachs, premier investment bank, Wall Street's premier investment bank, helped raise $6.5 billion for Malaysia's state fund, 1MDB, while conveniently ignoring glaring red flags as government officials looted the money. Goldman raked in an eye-watering $600 million in fees, about 100 times the normal rate for such work. Eventually, the bank coughed up nearly $5 billion in penalties, though the critics maintain the firm's partners still walked away with hefty bonuses from the original deal. No prison time. Really? Come on now. Is there such thing as justice here in this world? I don't think so. Because we're seeing more and more politicians getting away with crimes, banks getting away with crimes, criminals on death row are getting away with from being penalized, because banks see the government as a ATM machine that say, hey, we need a couple $100,000. Let's go ahead and figure out a way we can go ahead and do this, get this guy off of death row. Yeah, that happened in the case of Rodriguez, and we covered him on Monday. HSBC, Europe's second largest bank, and is based in London. Banking giant HSBC essentially operated as a financial concierge service for drug cartels. Funny about that, you got to show an ID card to get to open an account. All right, don't they check their clients? Laundering at least $881 million for the Mexican and Colombian narco traffickers, while also violating sanctions against Iran and other countries. Their Mexican branches even featured specially designed teller windows to accommodate the cartel's bulky cash boxes. Despite this brazen criminal activity, which would have landed regular folks in prison for decades, HSBC settled for $1.9 billion and dodged criminal prosecution through a controversial agreement with authorities. Really? Yeah. Never mind the profit that they made, JP Morgan, here's another one. What's this? Number 1, 2, 3. This is number 4. All right, I'm going to go ahead and mark them. JP Morgan Chase, America's largest bank, lost a whopping $6 billion through whopping. I don't consider $6 billion a drop in the bucket. Through reckless derivatives trading by Bruno Ixel, dubbed the London Whale, due to his massive market positions. CEO Jamie Dimon initially brushed off mounting losses as tempest in a teapot, even as traders desperately manipulate a risk model behind the scenes to hide the growing disaster. This spectacular failure, coming just 4 years after the 2008 crisis, exposed dangerous risk management holes at institutions deemed too big to fail, resulting in $920 million in penalties that barely affected the bank's stock price. So they got to keep $5 billion, really, and change. Risk management holes that institution deemed too big to fail? Yeah, you have vice presidents. Don't you put the president in jail, in prison? Hang them. One thing about 3 months ago, BlackRock, a huge financial indicator, had to go ahead and borrow $400 billion to go ahead and cover their short positions. I'm going to predict that they're going to be coming into the limelight here in a few months. All right, number 5. Swiss banking giant Credit Suisse ran a veritable tax evasion factory, complete with a separate office and secret elevator specifically for wealthy American clients looking to hide assets from the IRS. Bankers advised clients to destroy account documents when traveling and stash assets in shell companies, helping customers conceal billions from tax authorities over decades. The eventual price reached $2.6 billion in penalties, marking the first time in decades a major bank pleaded guilty to a U.S. criminal charge, though none of its top executives faced jail time. Again, no jail. Just, here, let me go ahead and get away with not paying taxes, and here's $10, to cover the fine. Yeah, no, I would get fined for what I owe plus interest. Why don't these people go ahead and get fined what they took in? And jail time. Oh, boy. Let's see, I guess number 6 on the hit list. Standard Chartered processed a mind-boggling $250 billion in transactions for Iranian clients while systematically stripping references to Iran from payment messages to dodge U.S. sanctions. When confronted, one bank executive arrogantly dismissed concerns with you Americans. Who are you to tell us, the rest of the world, that we're not going to deal with Iranians? The bank eventually paid $1.7 billion for circumventing sanctions against multiple countries. Wow. Though the delayed penalty hardly served as an effective deterrent during years of profitable sanction busting. I don't know how it is, but when countries agree to go ahead and put a country under sanctions because they violated some agreement, and a private company goes ahead and violates that agreement, well, then that private company should face jail time. And it's not how big you are. Here's a example of a tiny bank. I don't know if any of you remember the savings bank and loan crisis of the early 90s. Well, shockwaves were sent from late 80s, early 90s. Shockwaves were sent that were felt all over Europe from a tiny savings and loan. I think it was Kansas or Nebraska or something like that. and it felt as far away as Europe. And I thought to myself, if a bank, a savings and loan goes ahead and goes bankrupt, and we're feeling the shock waves of that in Europe, then our banking system is too complicated and too complex. These CEOs and bank presidents are making billions of dollars, all right, while going ahead and victimizing, and I say victimizing, and we'll get to that at the end of the show. People who are too small to do anything. The tiny Estonian branch Danske Bank somehow processed approximately 200 billion euro in suspicious transactions, roughly equivalent to Denmark's entire GDP. This tsunami of questionable money, primarily from Russia and former Soviet states, flowed through non-resident accounts over 8 years with virtually no oversight. The massive scale of the laundering operation eventually forced the CEO's resignation and triggered criminal investigations across Europe, highlighting how small, overlooked branches can become conduits for industrial-scale financial crime. Yeah, they used a small branch, but it was connected into a bigger branch, bigger bank. And, yeah, no jail time again for anybody. The bank, let's see. I didn't even say whether the CEO forced the CEO's resignation. Yeah, he probably walked away with a couple of $1 billion on that one. Okay, UBS in Switzerland. It's not just America or London. It's all over the world. We'll get to others later on here in the show. Swiss banking powerhouse UBS elevated tax evasion to an art form, helping wealthy Americans hide billions from the IRS through elaborately coded language, encrypted computers, and shell companies. Bank representatives smuggled diamonds in toothpaste tubes and used specially designed watches with hidden compartments to transport assets across borders. UBS ultimately paid $780 million in fines and agreed to release previously sacrosanct client information, effectively driving a stake through the heart of legendary Swiss banking secrecy. Yeah, well, I've got mixed feelings about that one. All right. British banks spent decades systematically pushing worthless payment protection insurance onto millions of unsuspecting customers, many of whom could never possibly benefit from the policies. Staff routinely added PPI without customer knowledge or pressuring clients into buying unnecessary coverage, creating a financial scandal of unprecedented scale. Yeah, I ran across that with a company that came into my yard looking to dump some material left over from a job earlier that morning, and then ended up paying $8,000, And how did this happen? Well, I took him to the wall. I took it to the state's attorney general, and I won. I got an entire refund of my $8,000. All right, so the cost cleanup exceeded 38 billion pounds in compensation, with major banks like Lloyd's, Barclays, and RBS forced to spend years repaying customers for what amounted to institutionalized theft. Yeah, this is the reason when you don't elect or appoint Christians to your head of your companies or your country, no matter what it is, you're going to go ahead and see corruption ensue. It's the end of story. We've already documented in the last show that the Soviet Union used to hire Christians to work in their mint because they knew they could be on it. They were honest. They didn't agree with them, all right? And they were persecuting Christians all over the country, but they hired them because they found them useful and they found them honest. Oh man, I don't even know where we're at now. But anyway, let's go ahead and it's just not Here's from France. BNP Paribas, France's largest bank, conducted billions in illegal transactions with Sudan, Iran, and Cuba over 8 years. Deliberately modifying documents to hide client identities and routing transfers through complex pathways to evade detection. BNP Paribas show particularly enthusiasm for business with Sudan, despite the well-documented genocide in Darfur, processing transactions for a country under sanctions for human rights atrocities. Again, they decided to go on their own. They went off the reservation. The bank ultimately paid an $8.9 billion penalty, the largest sanctions and violation finding in history, though most executives responsible for the policies remained employed and well compensated. Yeah. Where do I find a job like that? You know what? If I was stealing from the Air Force wholeheartedly, all right, all they had to do is search warrant in my home and, come up with this, and I'd been in prison. No ifs, ands, or buts. I would have landed a 10-year prison sentence. Oh, it's called black marketeering. Taking U.S. government property that the taxpayer paid for and using it. The only government employees that seem to be under the law are the U.S. military. Congress sure isn't. And in some cases, the presidents aren't either. They can commit treason, which we documented on this show, and they get away with it scot-free by usually a weak backbone, need I say it, limp dick DOJ that kind of excuses away their actions. They've gone ahead and relegated the FBI from one of the premier sources of justice in this country to one of the worst. I wouldn't trust them. Oh, by the way, yeah, I did dare say it. Okay, Lehman Brothers employed accounting sleight of hand known as Ripple 105 transactions to temporarily remove the approximately $50 billion in assets from its balance sheet at the end of financial quarters. This financial magic trick made the firm appear as slightly significantly less leverage to investors and regulators just before its collapse triggered the global financial crisis. Yeah, about 2007, 2008. The deception continued right until Lehman's historic failure, showing how even supposedly strict post-Enron accounting rules could be manipulated by determined financial figures with the right motivation. Motivation as in money. Again, on the hit list, Citibank. And now these are banks we all know and trusted. Recently, Bremer just sold out to Old National Bank, and I'm just kind of wondering if there was any funny doings there in light of all this. Citibank traders colluded in online chat rooms. They actually named the cartel to manipulate the global foreign exchange market, coordinating their trading to move currency prices and trigger client stop loss or for the bank's benefit. This wasn't just a few rogue employees, but a widespread practice affecting the $5.3 trillion daily Forex market, with traders explicitly discussing how to maximize bank profits at customer expense. Citigroup paid $1 billion in fine, though many traders simply moved to less regulated financial institutions and continued their careers. Yeah. I used to play the commodity market, and when they started going ahead, I got tired of losing money. Okay. And what happened is I put in a stop loss at a certain point. Okay. And 3 times in a row, that would come down there just enough to trigger my stop loss and then take my money and then go back up when I saw it was going to be moving up. Yeah. And I figured it out recently here. I just saw something on where they look at charts and they see that there's a what they call support right there. You got to put your stop loss pretty. The only time I made money when I didn't put a stop loss in. And they're like, oh, we don't know where this guy's stop loss is, so he doesn't have one. So, we can't take a loss of billions of dollars. So we got to keep going up. So he'll make a little bit of money, but yeah, I made $300 trading cotton one time. That was about it. Australia's major banks, Australia now. Now we had, what was that? Citibank, okay? This is Australia's major banks spent years charging customers approximately 1 billion Australian annually for services never actually provided, particularly in their wealth management divisions. The practice reached grotesque extremes when financial advisors continued charging monthly accounts customers who had died, and with some deceased clients billed for over a decade. The subsequent Royal Commission investigated revealed a culture of systematic theft that forced the big four Australian banks to refund over 1.2 billion Australian, while severely damaging public trust in country's financial sector. Again, a Christian wouldn't have done that. A true Christian. Yeah, we all know those Christians that, they say they're a Christian, but they're really not, and I've got I've run across a few of those myself, so, but it's not enough to go ahead and turn my back on my God, Here again, another one from France. Junior trader Jérôme Kervel nearly brought down France's second largest bank by executing 50 billion euro in authorized trades in unauthorized trades, resulting in losses of 4.9 billion euro when discovered. Kervel exploited knowledge from his previous back office role to bypass controls through fictitious transaction, highlighting dangerous organizational silos within major banks. While Kervel received a prison sentence, and hallelujah, somebody actually went to prison for this, many questioned whether Societe Generale's management should bear responsibility for creating a culture that encourages excessive risk-taking while maintaining inadequate oversight. This is the reason Glass-Steagall was put in. Was put in place in the 30s in this country to keep regular banking and investment banking separate. And people don't understand that. And Bill Clinton was the one who went ahead and repealed it, along with the Congress at that time. German processor, German again, pulled off an audacious 1.9 euro accounting fraud by claiming cash balances in Philippine banks that simply didn't exist. This massive deception allowed the fintech darling to inflate profits and assets for years, while management apparently siphoned company funds for personal use. The scandal proved particularly embarrassing for German regulators, who had actively defended the company against early fraud allegations, even temporarily banning short selling of its stock before the inevitable collapse revealed a complete regulatory failure. Again, were there any prisons? Anybody receive prison time over that one? This is what happens when we get away from our spiritual roots. Banks used to be a trusted institution. But then now, as we've gone ahead and gotten away from our spiritual roots, we got corruption creeping in from all corners. Lord Jesus, help this country. Bank of America knowingly sold billions in toxic mortgage-backed securities to investors while, we all understand how that worked. In the crash of 2008, we had a bunch of bad mortgages. And this is where Glass-Steagall was so important. The banks rolled them up and sold them as highly secure investments on Wall Street. So the banks could recoup their money when the investors bought it, but when the investors found out that they were worthless, Yeah, that's what caused the 2008 collapse. That was a record $16.65 billion settlement with the Department of Justice. Yeah, should have had some people hung over that one. This was done off of greed. I've got to take a moment to calm down here. My anger at the corruption going on is unbelievable. And nobody's going to jail for it. We have what, one example? All right. Italy's largest bank processed billions in transactions for Iranian clients who has German subsidies, with employees systematically removing or altering payment information that would have triggered sanctions and sanctions compliance systems. Unicredit's deliberate evasion continued for years, allowing prohibited transactions to flow through the financial system undetected, despite multiple warnings from compliance staff. The bank ultimately agreed to pay U.S. authorities $1.3 billion and pleaded guilty of federal charges, marking an unusually severe outcome for a European financial institution. I'll tell you why, because they probably weren't part of the Epstein Island clique. That's probably why. Now it's Italy. Here from Australia. Australia's largest bank failed to report over 53,000 suspicious transactions. They were money laundering for drug syndicates, ATM-like machines that accept anonymous cash deposits of up to $20,000 per transaction in Australian, creating a perfect channel for criminal money laundering that went unreported for 3 years despite internal warnings. You know, I think if I was president, I heard of a bank and I heard of, oh yeah, we kind of think that drug cartels are laundering money for our bank. I said, well, shut them down. I mean, it's that simple. Call the investigative authorities. Yeah. Systematic compliance failure resulted in a record 700 million Australian fines, significant management changes. All right, well, at least something happened. Management changes. Okay, and that's the correct thing to do. But no, again, nobody went to prison. That's the wrong thing to do. Germany's banking giant facility moving approximately 10 billion of suspicious money out of Russia. An elaborate scheme known as mirror trading. I mean, do these guys lay in bed at night on their bed thinking, how can I go ahead and cheat the system? How can I get more and more and more for myself? They ultimately paid $630 million in fines, adding to its extensive list of regulatory penalties, totaling over $20 billion since the 2008 financial crisis. Throw the CFO in prison to stop this. And not the country club prison either. But I mean, I'm talking like general population. I mean, doggone, man. And if the prisons are overcrowded, hang them. We come to the end of the 20, but I got more here to go. These scandals reveal a troubling reality where profit routinely trumps ethical conduct in global finance, with misconduct treated more as a cost of doing business than a fundamental breach of public trust. While financial institutions have paid over $300 billion in fines since 2008, the continuing cycle of scandals suggests that these penalties offer limited deterrence. As banking grows increasingly complex and global, the challenge of ensuring accountability remains largely unresolved. You know what? when we go ahead and we learn of the banking scandal, round up every CEO and start asking questions. You know what? Bring charges against those CEOs. Go ahead and say, but you know what? President's going to say no. President, especially one like Clinton or Obama or Biden, and Kate Biden, what'd you say? Yeah. I was amazed. Biden and Harris couldn't, at their rallies, couldn't fill a phone booth. And yet Biden somehow took the election. Yeah. He's a blithering idiot. We knew that back then, and we documented that on this show. And then 4 years afterwards, Republicans were outraged that they were kept in the dark over Biden's. Come on now. Cognitive decline. Really? You weren't outraged. You knew about it all along. You're just posing for the public. The Secret Service has just come out recently and said Biden got lost in his own closet in the White House. Top 10 unforgivable crimes banks have committed. Wells Fargo again. Recent indiscretion that cost thousands of people jobs and the company millions of dollars as well as their reputation. This might seem like the worst banking scam ever perpetrated, but that's not the case. As long as we have been trusting our money to our bank, corrupt people within those instances have been working behind the scenes to increase their wealth, whatever the cost. Here are 10 times banks have committed various illegals you should know about. Wachovia launders Mexican cartels drug money. Yeah. The bank was fined just 2% of its $12.3 billion profits for 2009. Once the case concluded, most of the money laundering was done via the remittance industry, which enables the bank to charge high fees to transfer money from U.S. to Mexico. All right. Yeah, they laundered 300 or transferred, money laundering operation, $378.4 billion. That's billion with a B, people. If I transferred, $1,000 to a drug cartel, I'd go to prison for 5 years. And you know what? It's not just the United States, Europe, and Australia. Chinese investigators have uncovered an underground banking industry for processing illegal money transfers. It was likely involved in channeling money for drug dealers and smugglers. Any prosecutions? None. Those arrested were involved in 158 separate cases of underground banking and money laundering. All right. I want to know about prosecutions. Forex. In May 2015, 5 of the world's longest bank, JP Morgan, Citicorp, Barclays, Royal Bank of Scotland, UBS, were fined $5.7 billion in charges of market manipulation. Yeah. Numerous bank works with the Nazis. All right. Chase Manhattan was one of them. Barclays Bank. They went ahead and froze the accounts of Jews. And in some cases, they surrendered it to the Nazis. HSBC, again, London, laundered billions for dictators, terrorists, and drug cartels. Yeah. We go on and on and on, people. If people don't have a spiritual foundation, corruption is going to happen. I can't say that enough. I can't say it often enough. I can only go ahead and tell you guys that when you elect somebody to office, he's got to be a Christian. You put somebody in charge of your bank, he's got to be a Christian. He's got to be a man of morality. The Libor scandal. Yeah, that goes ahead and London Internet interbank offered rate. All right, it's complicated, but boils down to banks rigging the numbers to make money. Deutsche Bank was one of the biggest participants of the fraud. They were fined $1.74 billion. Yeah. Yeah, when we go for a loan, let's put this in perspective. When we go to the bank for a loan, when they ask you what our house is worth, we say probably about $60,000. That might be only worth $50,000, but they go and they take that down, and then they go ahead and send out an appraiser and say, give them the $60,000. So we give them the loan. Then the bank went okay, but. Wells Fargo again. Illegally seized cars belong to U.S. service members. When service members take government-sponsored vacations to war zone, I like how they word that, they are granted certain rights to protect their property. Let's say a soldier is captured by the enemy in a POW camp for a period of time. He's probably not going to be able to make payments on his car. The Service Member Civil Relief Act is supposed to protect the soldier's possessions so that they cannot be repossessed while he is actively serving. Unfortunately, not all banks follow the rules. Wells Fargo fell into that category when they seized the cars of several military members who were deployed overseas. Between 2008 and 2015, Wells Fargo repossessed cars in at least 413 cases. In one instance, the bank seized the car of an Army National Guardsman who was serving in Afghanistan and auctioned it off. Then the bank went after the soldier's family to recover an additional $10,000 to clear the car loan. Ultimately, the bank was fined $24 million over the illegal repossessions. You know what? That's the exact same thing what happened to me, but only with my credit card. And I went ahead and I told you the circumstances behind that one. Shaved money from pension accounts. If you have a pension through a bank, they might be shaving money. So I'd be going ahead and watching your statement real close. Bank of Credit and Commerce International, BCCI, involved in, they went ahead and provide, you remember the Iran-Contra affair, with Oliver North and all that during the Reagan administration. And that's seen as a great move by the United States, but they needed a bank to move all that money. And that BCCI was one of it, was the bank. And it went down under due to its illegal activities, fraudulent mortgage scam and the Great Recession. Yeah. Many people and institutions were responsible for the so-called Great Recession that hit in 2007. But if we had to point finger, it would be at the bankers who allowed it to happen. The reason for the recession was that banks provide a loan to almost anyone who asks. Okay, remember that this was part of Barney Frank's get them in houses at any cost. This was the adjustable rate mortgage came into being. They offered low at first, but then would increase. All right. You only pay like 0.01%, on the interest for the first year, but it increased after that. People would get low variable interest rates so that they could afford their homes for the first year. Then the rates would increase drastically the second year, making their homes unaffordable. As a result, businesses were building more homes than people could actually afford, which flooded the market. Suddenly, a home that had been worth $250,000 one day plummeted to $95,000 the next day. What happened was this. With the market so full and few people able to get loans anymore, the United States entered the worst financial disaster since the Great Depression. Due to paperwork and accounting errors, banks even foreclosed on properties that they shouldn't have. So people lost their homes when they deserved to and when they didn't. Thank the banks. Yeah, that was a result of Glass-Steagall. Glass-Steagall was repealed by Bill Clinton. He signed it. It's on his shoulders. And to a lesser degree, the Congress that went ahead and brought this piece of legislation. These rules were put in place for a reason, people. When you hear of a president repealing a law, all right, that was put in place years ago. Let's take a classic example of what's going on today. There was a law, the McCarran-Walter Act, I think it was called, that Muslims couldn't hold public office. End of story. That was repealed by the Bush administration. George H.W. Yeah, that should have never been repealed. And apparently there's a communist, communists can never hold office. We need to go ahead and start enforcing that one. I haven't heard if it's been repealed or not. It wouldn't surprise me none if it wasn't, or if it was. Okay, after the saving and loan crisis, okay, how the banks got their get out of jail free card. It's easier to fool people than to convince them they've been fooled. Mark Twain. This is the 9th in a series on banking that begins here. After the saving loan crisis in the 1980s, remember that saving and loan bank in nowhere, United States went ripple effect all the way over to Europe. After the saving and loan crisis in the 1980s, over 1,000 bankers were convicted of criminal offenses, but in the aftermath of 2008, U.S. bankers were not charged criminally, even when the evidence came out later that they committed serious and widespread fraud. Why not? Earlier, 2 major banks got caught laundering money for a drug cartel during the lead up to 2008. Those banks were given sweetheart non-prosecution agreements, so if bankers were not going to go to jail for washing blood money, they were not going to go to jail for mere financial fraud. How the bankers got control of DOJ and achieved this immunity will be explained in a future post on a series of enablers. Let's see. This is how they got the get out of jail free card was given to bankers on a twist of the too big to fail sentencing guideline. Okay, we talked about HSBC wondering, okay, the banks did their scrubbing in the period overlapping with the 2008 crisis. Yeah, well, you know what? If your bank is caught going ahead and laundering money for drug cartels, ignoring sanctions to Iran and the Sudan and whatever, your CEO ought to be going to jail, all right? And the vice president steps up. End of story. That provides, if you do wrong, you're going to be going to prison. And throughout all this, and here's the clincher, and the banks want us to switch to a CBDC, central bank digital currency? I don't think so. If you post something online that they don't like, they can switch you off with a keystroke and they'll never be able to trace who did it. All right, I will guarantee you that, they'll come out with some flimsy excuse like, somebody did it somewhere, but we can't tell you where, so we don't know. All right. Rules mean nothing to them. The banks. And when I say them, now I'm talking about the banks. Rules mean nothing to them. The presidents, except for maybe this one. Rules mean nothing to them. Politicians, rules mean nothing to them. Lawyers, yeah. So we have a crisis on our hands, and this is why I think we're coming down to the end of times, as God has predicted and failed, because I don't think my words are going to go anywhere. But let me go ahead and take a reading out of 2 Timothy chapter 3, the coming apostasy. Verse 1, but know this, that in the last days, perilous times will come. For men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy. Did you catch that? Lovers of money? Unloving, unforgiving. Yeah. That's what slanderers without self-control. Brutal, despises good. Traitors, yeah, we've got traitors going on, headstrong, and that starts at Bill Clinton in the White House. Headstrong, hardy, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its power, and from such people turn away. For of this sort are those who creep into households and make captives of gullible women, loaded down with sins, led away by various lusts. Yeah, you know what? You can't say it enough. You've got preachers out there by the dozens, and by the thousands, and I'm one of them. All right, I preach every Sunday morning. And I go ahead and I lay down the law of the Lord. And if you don't follow the Lord's word, you are going to go ahead and be leading yourself down a path that you'll find yourself in addiction. You'll find yourself addicted to sin, whatever it may be, alcohol, drugs, whatever. And even women, that could be a thing of it. So, you've got to go ahead and keep your spiritual roots about you. I have seen, what was one of those things, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. I have seen it for myself. You have a couple of parents who are strong in the Lord. None of their children are. Why not? They decide to go their own way. Without self-control. Yeah, you got people that are just going around like the libtards. Yeah. What's unpopular this week? Let me check my email. Disobedient to parents. Unthankful, unholy. Yeah. Back in my final days of the Air Force, I was talking with a friend of mine, and he was telling me about how he just took a vacation to Walt Disney World, to all sorts of places out in California, and they had a good time. It was a month where they just spent money and a good time and enjoying the family. But 2 weeks after they got home, his son was saying, "We never go anywhere." I went, "Well, you know what? Next time you take your vacation, I just sit there and prop my lawn chair out there and open up a cooler of beer. So I never take you anywhere, remember? So that's the way it's going to be." I'm hearing, parents max out their credit cards to go ahead and give it their kids everything for Christmas, and they end up paying for it the rest of the year. Meanwhile, all those gifts are gone, by March. And I don't know what to tell you, except, I can't say until I'm blue in the face, but get your spiritual house in order. And that's what we have to do, people. We have to do. We have to go back to the way the foundation of our country was God, guns, and guts. And I'm going to tell you why the right hasn't. The right in this country, the deplorables, as Hillary Clinton called us, haven't done anything, because we are waiting for our government that we pay taxes to do something. And this stack of crap that I've got right here in my hands is the first place they can start. They can start by removing all the Muslims from our country. They can go ahead and they're here to take over. This is an invasion. They can go ahead and start going ahead and bringing back the death penalty in earnest. That's the name for this show, Justice Quest. Anyway, my name's Tom O'Neill, your host of Justice Quest, and if you like what you hear, please go to our website, justicequestlive.com, and go ahead and hit that like and follow and donate button if you can. And you can also catch us on Facebook and on YouTube. So we go ahead and say we'll see you later, and have a good week. And we will be talking on Friday Frenzy, about a myriad of subjects, so we're just going to hit it hard and keep hitting it hard until somebody goes in and pays attention. If you follow the show, go ahead and have a question or comment. Go ahead and feel free to leave it. We don't have a call-in line yet, but we're working to get that set up. So, all right, thank you for joining us, and we will go ahead and talk to you later.